examples from my research. If you follow this link, this is a Dropbox folder that I've put together of all of my publications. Why do I have this document? I am going up for promotion this year, and it's very helpful if people who are writing letters from you can easily find all of your papers. So that's the only reason why I have this really easy to find link for all of my papers. But it could serve you a purpose in this class. So they're organized by year. I have some of them open that I'm just going to show you. The point of showing you these is to show, one, examples of manuscripts drafted or written in LaTeX, the kind of powers there, but also the visualization parts, and so that you can make some really nice figures in MATLAB and Python. So things like that curly brace there for LaTeX, showing different scenarios. That's something that's very possible, and in fact was made in LaTeX. Quite complicated cases there as well, and summations, lots of integrals, derivatives, etc. Nice tables formatted in LaTeX. You can make the parentheses do interesting things for you as you want them to be larger and scale with your text. I wanted to show you a couple of figures in particular in this one. So here we were trying to show the difference between two different types of solutions. So we had circles for scheme 1 and X's for scheme 2, and showing that they give exactly the same thing. So we wanted the two different symbols to coincide, and for you to clearly see that. If one was a solid circle and one was a solid square, you wouldn't be able to see that as clearly. So we had that, but then also the shape of the curve that went between them. And then we also were able to, in MATLAB, put the text on there. That's a really tedious process, and I don't actually recommend that because you have to tell it what coordinate you want it, not just kind of label it like you might in PowerPoint. So it was reproducible, but it was challenging to actually do the first time. So maybe it was worth it, maybe it wasn't. But we could make it match exactly the colors that were on the figure. But so that's something that's possible. We also used, I think the black arrows we did draw in MATLAB, and had to tell the coordinates, but we were trying to indicate a very specific feature in each of those graphs. And then finally, we used the subset feature. That's another thing that's in MATLAB where you can do an inset. So this figure is generated in MATLAB, this figure is generated in MATLAB, it embeds this one as an inset. So that is a common thing that people might want to do, and then the labeling on top of there. That's that one. This is kind of an example of what not to do. So this was my first publication as a PhD student. This proceedings didn't allow color figures. They weren't high resolution. It wasn't very clear to see. So don't do that. We also did things like having curves that change style and color along the way for different increments of some solution domain, and having the legend indicate what those meant. And so that's a way to communicate, particularly the combination of color and line style, so that if it was printed in black and white, you could still see those differences if it had been printed in black and white. I had a colleague recently point out to me about the rainbow colors are the default ones in MATLAB, that they actually don't clearly show you differences. So think about other color schemes that are better for showing you the transitions between different magnitudes. So looking for other color maps in MATLAB and Python is recommended. Here, I wanted to, this is an example of a showing data and showing a curve, We did not show the error bars on that data. It would have been strengthened if we had shown the error bars or some sort of confidence intervals with that. And so in our later work, we did that. At that time, we didn't know how to do it. So having several different data sets on the plot and then having the references with those was something that we've done before. These labels we made later in a different program. We also made these labels separately in a different program, so not really that innovative on the MATLAB part. I think that's the last figure there. The other related study to that one, we did a lot of bifurcation analysis, and so we had these plots where we needed to show at certain combinations of parameters how did multiple different outputs change with time. And so one of them was stable. We could see the oscillations damp down. One of them was not stable. That specific set of parameters, here's the outputs that came from it. And so we were trying to show here's what corresponds to 0.1 on the other graph, and here's what corresponds to 0.2 on the other graph. And so we wanted to highlight very specific things, so we were able to do that. This one, this is what is full of what my husband calls my rainbow plots, highlighting certain things. So here, the really important part was to make sure that the scales were the same so that we could compare easily between all of these different figures. And so the fact that the maximum was always at 3 is a pretty simple concept, but we wanted to make sure that the axes, the limits were the same for all of those so that we could do a fair comparison. By default, they would all go from blue to red, but we wanted red to indicate the same numerical value for comparison for all of those scenarios. Here we also had a lot of things to plot, so we compared things with open colors to solid colors for different cases. The way MATLAB by default will give you open symbols. If you tell it that the marker has a face color, then it will fill it in. So that's how you could get a circle versus a filled in circle. There's not a symbol notation for a filled symbol. It's just giving it a face color. By default, that face color is transparent. And another thing that we tried to be consistent with, that these have a lot of different scenarios on them, but then using the same symbol notation to compare between multiple figures. So if we had the blue triangles that meant something in figure 1, then that meant the same thing in figure 2 or figure 3, even though those figures might have been comparing different scenarios. We just had at least which ones were in common kept the same notation between them. This is the ones that where I started to learn how to do error bars and confidence intervals as well. So quite proud that we were able to put confidence intervals and shading regions around curves that were estimated and the error bars on the data. You've seen some of those examples earlier this semester, but this actually communicates quite well. Also, you can do bar graphs in MATLAB and make them different colors and make them different transparencies. There's not an easy way in MATLAB to put different patterns on error bars. So, or not error bars, sorry, bar graphs. If you needed more patterns, Excel or some other visualization software has more patterns that you could have. So you might have things with the crosshatches or sort of a checked pattern or some different types of patterning that you've seen in publications before. So this is what MATLAB could do very reproducibly, so we made different shades of the color, but once we got to about 5 shades, that was about as much as you could distinguish with your eye. If you tried to do 10 shades of one color, you might not be able to easily tell the differences between those. And it got a little busy.